Hello, welcome to another episode of Varsity360. I am Columbian sports editor Micah, joined today by Tim Martinez. And guess what, Tim? It is the regional round of the state basketball tournament. We are going to break it all down, all the regional matchups, the seeding, and what we can expect from Southwest Washington teams heading into one of the most important weekends of the season. Once again, we're coming to you from the First Pacific Financial Studios. So thank you to First Pacific Financial, like we always say, for supporting this show, for being such a big supporter of high school sports, and by extension, being such a big supporter of the community. So, Tim, we have our pairings. We were waiting on Sunday to see what the selection committee up at the WIAA would come down with as far as is a team a top 8 seed and therefore guaranteed at least a trip to either Tacoma for the big schools or Yakima for the small schools, or do they have to play in one of those high pressure loser out games that the 9 seeds or worse have to do? So what is your reaction to just on a general big picture scale to how the seeding came down?
I think big picture, I think it worked out okay for some of our teams. I thought, we have 4 area teams that are guaranteed a trip to the Dome. That would be the Camas girls at 4A girls, Mark Morris boys in 2A. The Camas girls are guaranteed a spot, and then the Seton Catholic boys they're all guaranteed spots. So they'll be going on to Tacoma or Yakima. Other teams got to win their way in, but they received the higher end of the bracket, which means they're playing close to home. We're going to have 5 games on Friday and Saturday up at Battleground, so a lot of teams will be able to play close to home in front of their home fans. So it looks like the path is set up, I think, pretty well for local teams to get to the final destinations if things work out well this weekend for them.
If you could, just explain kind of the process that the WIAA goes through, not only to seed these teams, but also to decide where they go to play and which teams get to stay close to home.
Okay. So in the brackets for like 4A and 2A and 1A, it's a 16-team bracket. So you have the bracket split in half. There were seating committees on Sunday, so these are actual people who are in either on a Zoom call, I'm guessing, coming together to decide where to place these teams in the bracket according to their seeds. So the teams that are seeded 1 through 8, they'll play each other 1, 8, 2, 7, 3, 6. And the winner of those games, the top half bracket, they will advance to the quarterfinals, and they will play on Thursday, next week, Thursday, in the state quarterfinals. The losers will go to the Dome site. They'll play on Wednesday in the round of 12 in an elimination game to get into sort of the double elimination part of that bracket. And then the lower half of the bracket, 9 through 16, the winners of that game will play in the round of 12 on Wednesday at state while the losers are out. And then within those brackets, they're kind of split into half. So like in the top bracket, seeds 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then on the bottom half of the bracket, seeds 9, 10, 11, and 12. They get to play at regional sites that are close to home. So the WIA every district has sites that they submit to say that we'll host games at these sites. For us down here, Battleground has long been put in a bid to host. Camas this year also put in a bid to host. I was talking a couple weeks back to Camas AD Stephen Baranowski, and he thought that Camas was going to host, but apparently he was unaware that Battleground had also put in a bid, and I think the WIA just kind of decided we're going to go with what we know, and they've done, and Battleground's done a really good job of hosting, and it's also a little bit, I think it's a little bit better accessible site for teams coming down from the north. You come down I-5 and you shoot across, 512 into Battleground?
Yeah, instead of looping all the way around.
Instead of kind of going all the way in and then winding your way into Camas, it's a little bit more accessible that way, I suppose. So then if you're in the higher ed, you get to play a little bit closer to home. Otherwise, you're traveling, and so that's kind of how the whole thing gets sort of put together, placed together. I think there are discussions. They take a look at RPI, but really, RPI is not a really heavy factor, I think, in determinations. They kind of get sort of underneath some of that data, and I think it produced what was in my mind, and I think in a lot of us on the staff, that we were a little bit surprised to see that the Camas girls ended up as the number 1 seed.
Well, that was one of the big issues. Certainly, if you pay attention to the comments every time a new RPI ranking or as that has developed, the Camas girls number 1 seed overall. I think nobody would argue that they aren't deserving based on what they've done against teams from the state of Washington. But they are the perfect example of the one shortcoming that the RPI metric has, which is that it counts all games against out-of-state opponents equally. It doesn't matter if you're playing, a team from over in Oregon that is just kind of middle of the pack and maybe a good one-on-one matchup, or in the case of Camas girls, if you're taking on some of the best programs in the country, the Archbishop Middies, the Mater D's, it's Camas. All 6 of their losses are against teams that are state championship caliber, if not national caliber.
Yeah, they went all over. Well, they went to Washington, D.C. early in December, and they played teams from Washington, D.C. They played a state champion team from Pennsylvania, and they played one of the better teams in the Chicago area. They lost 2 of those 3 games, and then they played a tournament down in Portland where they had teams from Northern and Southern California, some really good teams like Mater Dei, Etiwanda, Archbishop Mitty came up. And then their 6th loss was against Clackamas, which is also a top-ranked Oregon team. And so, I was talking to Meg Wachnick about this last week, and she was saying that she didn't think Camas would end up with the number 1 seed. And I actually kind of agreed with her because I thought the metric of that 18-6 record would people would look at that and go, oh, we can't put an 18-6 team as the number 1 seed, but you absolutely can.
Yeah.
If you look at it a different way, if you looked at it like if you took a Class 1A Washington team that was really good and maybe defending champions or defending state runners-up or something, and they bring back their entire lineup. So a team like I don't know, like Nooksack Valley or Montesano or Seton Catholic or something like that, and they brought this team back, and to get ready for state the next year, they decided to just stack up and play the best 4A teams in the state and the best 3A teams in the state, and they came out of that 18-6. No one would hold that record against them before going up and not playing just other 1A competition. And it's essentially what Camas did. They just did it on a more national scale. They had to go find bigger schools and more competitive programs from across the country. And I think the biggest question that you sort of have to ask when you look at that is, do we think that teams like Woodinville or Kamiakin or Sumner, some of the other big top rated 4A teams, if they had played Camas's schedule, would their record be better or the same or worse than what Camas's is? Mm-hmm. And I think what the committee came up to is that they don't believe that those teams would have had as much trouble as Camas would have had, and that Camas, deserves the number 1 spot. So it was interesting again because I usually the metrics of it doesn't look good. When you see 18-6 at number 1, there's probably people around the state going, "What?" If they don't know, I did see some remarks by Todd Millis from Scorebook Live. Mm-hmm. He went up. He's seen Woodinville play, and he watched Camas and Sumner play last week at the bi-district tournament. Camas won, I think it was like 49-42, so it was a competitive game. And he came off with the summation that there are 4 teams that sort of separate themselves in the 4A. There's Camas, there's Woodinville, there's Kamiakin, and then there's Sumner. And all of them have, pieces of their team that make them really good teams and difficult matchups against other teams. And he sort of said they kind of set themselves apart. Within that group, he says Camas he still thinks is the best, but he says, we could see competitive games between all of them. And so, I think that's a fair assessment. I haven't seen some of those other teams, but I think it's a reasonable assessment. So really, the actual fact if you're seated in the top 4, anywhere in the top 4, really the path to the state championship is basically the same.
Yes.
You've got to win 4 games from here until March 2nd or whenever the final day is. You got to win 4 games against 4 good teams. And it just doesn't really matter what order those 4 teams arrive. You got to beat them. If you think you're the state champion, then you think you can beat any of those other teams. So it doesn't matter if you meet them in the championship game or in the quarterfinals or semifinals. You're going to have to win 4 good games. I also saw another comment. It was like somebody said that Camas is going to play Gonzaga Prep, the number 8 seed. And they said, oh, it's kind of a rough draw for Gonzaga Prep. They got to come all the way from Spokane and sort of be, sort of served up to Camas. But that's, last year, Camas was the number 1 seed. They played Kamiakin, the 8th seed. Kamiakin came from the Tri-Cities, and Kamiakin played Camas very tightly for 3 quarters until the Papermakers eventually pulled away. So there's no guarantee anywhere that Gonzaga Prep can't also do that to the Camas or another team down the road. So I think it's going to be an interesting, weekend and week next week to see how this all shakes out.
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect segue into looking at these games that are going to be at Battleground. And we'll, of course, go over all the pairings that we have for Southwest Washington schools. But why don't we start with those 5 games at Battleground. Camas against number 8 seed Gonzaga Prep, like you mentioned, that's one of 3 games at Battleground on Saturday. So if you're a fan of high school hoops and you just want to, stake out a spot in the Battleground gym from 2 p.m. all the way through the end of that 6 p.m. game, you're going to see some great basketball. The Camas Gonzaga Prep game is the 4 o'clock game. Action there actually begins at 2 o'clock with the number 11 seed Skyview boys facing number 14 Woodinville, 2 p.m. Saturday. Skyview, they've had an interesting journey over the past few weeks. They've, they went from having almost the Greater St. Helens League title in their grasp to having to go to a tiebreaker, which they dropped to Camas, but then they got revenge against Camas in a winner-to-state game in the bi-district tournament. So Skyview is nothing if not battle-tested.
Yeah, even earlier in this season, their win-loss record may not, open a lot of eyes, but they again played back in December. They played a lot of the teams that are in this field right now, and so teams like West Valley of Yakima, which will play Camas, they played them. They played Davis. They played Glacier Peak. A couple other teams. So yeah, so they played some tough games. I really kind of thought as they moved to the latter stages of January, they were kind of starting to gel into a team that could make a good run at state. And then they lost that season finale to Union, which put them in the tiebreaker, which they then lost to Camas the very next night. But then they came back and they earned their way back to state. So I still think they are a dangerous team, and so it will be an interesting matchup again. Taking on Woodinville up at Battleground. The other thing I liked about the way they set up the schedule for Battleground is they're doing it 2, 4, and 6.
Yes.
And they've done this in the past where they have a game that tips off at 10. They'll go at 10, noon, 2, and 4. Nobody wants to play a basketball game at 10 o'clock. I know Aria Long's got to go up north and play up at Tacoma at 10 o'clock in the morning. Nobody wants to play a game at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, especially if you're going from out of the area.
Yeah. No one wants to. And it's hard to get any kind of electricity or anything to go, and you're there at 10 o'clock in the morning. So I was happy with the way they set the schedule later in the day, and kind of sets up they kind of split. There's 5 games at Battleground. They're doing some on Friday, they're doing some on Saturday. So that's going to be a good kickoff of the 3 days of the 3 games on Saturday.
Yeah. I mean, you kick it off with Skyview, which obviously, we just talked about their story, and you go right into Camas girls with kind of the middle game at 4 p.m. And then you cap the night with the number 12 seed Columbia River boys. Again, a very interesting team that, has 2 shooters that when they're on, they can be dangerous, and Ari Richardson and Aaron Hoey, plus a strong supporting cast. The number 12 seed Columbia River Rapids go against the number 13 seed White River Hornets in a elimination game. And so just based on the seeding alone, you expect this to be very competitive and a high stakes game that hopefully will give an exciting end to that triple header at Battleground.
Yeah. Again, it's 12 and 13. So usually, when the matchups like that, it could be a toss up. Who's 12, who's 13? River's lucky enough where they get to be at 12, so they don't have to travel very far. I think River is probably itching to get back out on the court again. They played Mark Morris in the district title game, and they were in a 16-0 hole right out of the gate. I mean, it was like Mark Morris couldn't miss shots, and River just kept, just couldn't get things to fall early on. And from that point, they kind of played evenly, but there was just too much of a hole to kind of dig out. So I think they want to come back and show that they're a better team that maybe things started out last week up at Kelso. So, I think it's going to be a good battle, and looking forward to seeing how they match up with White River.
Well, I think one thing about Columbia River that they can take into now this do or die part of the postseason is Mark Morris is coming on with obviously Braden Olson being one of the best players in Southwest Washington, if not the state. Everything's kind of set up for the great Bill Backamus curtain call that I think a lot of people are expecting Mark Morris to make a real strong showing in the state tournament. Well, Rivers faced him twice and beat him once. So that's obviously some experience that the Rapids can draw on in the state tournament.
Yeah, and I think they've seen the Monarchs in two different stages. I think December they were still trying to find their roles and stuff, and River was able to beat them on River's home floor. They came back and played them at Longview just a couple of weeks back, and they kind of saw a little bit, the juggernaut that Mark Morris has kind of become coming out of the holiday break and into January and February. But still, I think they played with Mark Morris for a while and then just couldn't keep up. So. Yeah. And that game, Aaron Hoey was doing everything he could to keep them in the game, so you kind of saw the potential that River has when they get going. And this last weekend at Kelso, Carter Sharon came off the bench and provided a spark when they were in the big hole. So they've got different pieces, and if they can get them all working in the same place, it could be a good game. Well,
let's look at the two Friday games, two girls basketball regional games Friday at Battleground, and it starts at 6 p.m. with the number 9 seed Ridgefield Spudders facing number 16 Kingston. And the number 9, number 8 debate, I think, is always an interesting one because you could take two sides of that coin. Number 9, Ridgefield, you're going to be favored against a number 16 Kingston team on Friday night, but you're still in a loser-out situation. You go one seed higher in the 2A bracket. You have Columbia River girls, which obviously won the league title and are deserving of a higher seed than Ridgefield, but Columbia River, they have to go on the road to Ellensburg to face an absolute juggernaut in the Bulldogs over there in Ellensburg that are, I think, the consensus favorite to win the state title this year. You have to go take on that tough task, but regardless of how it goes against the number 1 seed, you're guaranteed a spot, at least in Yakima. I think it's pretty silly to say that you wouldn't trade the number 8 seed for the number 9 seed, but certainly from a psychological point of view, there are some good things about being a number 9 seed if you take care of business against number 16 seed.
Yeah, you can come off and you put in a good win and you can feel good as you head into the dome, whereas the 8 seed might be coming off an ugly loss. Mm-hmm. On the flip side, if River goes into that game with Ellensburg and says, hey, we're ready to compete with the best team in the state, and we're just going to go after them and we're going to give us our best shot, and you kind of test where you are and you kind of see, the things that you need to work on, it might be also a positive thing to come out of that, even if you end up not winning. I think it's for Ridgefield. It's kind of a cool thing. Last week I was talking with Meg, and she was going to go out and cover the Ridgefield winner to state game against, I think it was Washougal, and she says, "When's the last time Ridgefield made it to the state tournament?" And I was like, "Oh, that's a good question." So she looked it up and she said 2007, and I went 2007, and I was like thinking about it, and so I went back into our archives and fished it out and I found this story on Lauren Heflin.
Oh, yes.
As a senior, and there's a nice big story, and we got photos in our archives with Lauren as a senior in 2007 when Ridgefield went to the state tournament, and now the Spudders are back in the state playoffs, and this time Lauren Heflin's the head coach.
Yeah, it's come full circle for the Spudders. Yeah, so obviously Ridgefield kicks off the action at Battleground 6 p.m. Friday. On the back of that, at 8 p.m., you have the number 12 seed Seton Catholic girls facing number 13 Eatonville at 8 p.m. Seton Catholic, I think they're probably going to come into this game feeling like they have something to prove. They had, 18 wins?
18 and 5, I think.
18 wins, rolled through the Trico League. Now, the the criticism of against that argument that they dominated the Trico League as well, how good was the Trico? I think there were some questions about that. Seton Catholic did everything that they needed to do. They took care of their business, but are still find themselves as the number 12 seed going against the Cruisers of Eatonville. I would think that they maybe feel like they have to, quiet some doubters there up on the seating committee.
Yeah, I was, when I saw that as a 12, I thought, oh, wow, that's kind of a rough seating. They 18-5. I think they started the season 2-4, and then they won 16 straight before losing in the district title game to Montesano. And I thought, wow, that's kind of rough. But then you look at the number 11 seed, which is Montesano, the team they lost to. That's a district champion, league champion, district champion, and they're number 11. So maybe it's just that the 1A is just really stacked with good teams.
Well, that's it for the teams that are going to play in Battleground. 2 games on Friday, 3 games on Saturday. But let's talk about the teams that have to hit the road now. And one of those in another 13-12 matchup. And again, showing the difference between a 12 seed like Seton Catholic, which gets to drive 25 minutes and play their regional round game. Number 13 Camas Boys, they have to hit the road and go to Yakima to face number 12 West Valley. That's going to be a tough matchup. That's going to be a pro West Valley crowd over there in Yakima. The Papermakers, it's going to be a tough test for them, but they are riding some momentum. They clinched a state berth by beating 2-time defending state champion Curtis in a loser-out game on Saturday. So I know obviously Curtis, they graduated most of their players from those state championship teams, but yet the Papermakers, they have a test in front of them, but they're feeling pretty good about themselves, especially when a shooter like Beckett Curry can fill it up like he can.
Yeah, the Papermakers have kind of been playing really well when they're, when they have to play really well. These sort of elimination kind of clutch games. They lost their league finale against Battleground, and they're probably thinking they're going to be the number 2. But turns out Skyview also loses, so then they get a second chance in the tiebreaker, which they won at Prairie. And then they lost the first round at bi-district. So now they're in loser out mode, and they won up north and they won a loser out game, and then they lost back here to Skyview in that winter to state game. But then they had to go back up and play another good team on Saturday in another loser out game, and they pulled it together. So maybe that's the recipe that they need. They need to go on the road and play a game where they got to win, and that's what they're going to be doing this weekend, heading all the way to Yakima. I think it's going to be a game where they kind of need a lot of contributions so that they can kind of take some of the pressure off Beckett Curry.
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Camas Boys remind me a little bit of Columbia River Boys in that when their shooters are on, they can be really dangerous. And of course, no shooter in the area is perhaps as dangerous as Beckett Curry, but what you encounter in the state tournament is that if you have one good shooter, that shooter is probably going to draw a lot of attention from the defense. I expect West Valley to throw a couple double teams at him. And so that's when you're going to need players like Ethan Harris, Jace Van Voorhees to really step up and carry some of that supporting load.
Yeah, and if they can come up because if you double team someone, it's going to leave someone else open on the floor. There's opportunities there to get points in other ways for Camas. And then once you do that, then it forces the defense to kind of adjust to that, and that will open up more opportunities for Beckett Curry. So, that's how things will work when they're working well for Camas. And if they can, come out and shoot well early, I think would be a really key. It's something, if you get on the road like that and you're in a hole, could make it seem even more difficult. Well,
the last 4A Greater St. Helens League team that we haven't touched on yet, we obviously touched on the Skyview boys, the Camas girls, the Camas boys, but the Skyview girls, they're a number 16 team. They head on the road to face number 9 Lake Stevens in Arlington. But regardless of how it goes up there against Lake Stevens, and by no means are we writing off Skyview at all, because they are playing, I think, some of their best basketball of the year. And that was shown at the bi-district tournament where the Storm had to win 2 loser-out games. They won both of those by just a couple of points. Both were close. And then they won a close game against Kentwood to clinch their trip to the state playoffs. I saw that state clinching game against Kentwood. And the thing I noticed about Skyview is they don't have that one lights out score, but they get so many contributions from all up and down the lineup, whether it's, Kira Parks or, sometimes it's Lainey Phillips, but they just have such a good chemistry right now that they're playing with that I think obviously that they should be very proud of having made it to this, but, they haven't been denied yet when the chips are on the table in a loser out situation.
Yeah, I mean, you probably not a lot of people expect, a 16 seed to knock off a 9 seed, but really, I don't think a lot of people thought that Skyview, as the 3rd place team from the 4A Greater St. Helens League, would be one of the teams from the area that still be playing. I did catch the Union Kentwood game on Saturday up at Tacoma before I had to head up to the state swim meet, so I caught the first half, and I was watching Kentwood, and they were hitting threes, and they were looking really good, and then I had to stop and think. I was like, well, wait a minute. Skyview beat this team 2 days ago, and so I think I think it's part of the allure of high school sports is that on different nights, on different situation matchups, you can get a lot of different results, and so Skyview has been riding that here in the postseason, winning games that they need to win that probably some people didn't think they would. So why not go up to Arlington and knock off a pretty good Lake Stevens team? It's like they've kind of shown they can do that up to this point. So let's see if they can do it.
Well, we've got games in the regional round Friday and Saturday, but officially the regional round of the state tournament began Tuesday with the 3A in their 20-team bracket. Evergreen Girls hosted number 17 Eastside Catholic, Evergreen Girls number 16 seed. We're recording this on a Tuesday, so we don't know exactly how that game is going to go, but it kind of brings up that issue that they talk about with the 3As having a 20-team bracket. Does it really feel like a state tournament when you're playing in your home gym like Evergreen does in a loser-out game, and just to earn the right to go and play another loser-out game? If Evergreen wins, they will go up to play number 9 seed Lake Washington in Bellevue on Saturday.
Yeah, that's the big rub with this 20-team bracket, is it kind of feels like that first round doesn't always feel like state in a variety of sports. You go up to softball in the spring, and they've got to play these Tuesday loser outs before they actually move into the double elimination bracket. So that's kind of I think it's why they were hoping that they could maybe restructure the classifications coming into this next classification, where they could remove 20 team. And as it turned out, the WIA opted not to balance the classifications and take this out. So whereas some of the teams in the 16-team brackets, at 4A and 2A and 1A, even if you're on the lower half, you got to win one game, and then you get to go to the dome site. Well, in the 3A and also down in 1B, they're playing these round of 20 games on Tuesday, so you have to win 2. You got to win 1 on Tuesday, and you got to come back and win another one on Saturday, and it's a tough road, especially for Evergreen. They're playing a couple of other Metro League teams, which typically are a very competitive league. So whether that's Eastside Catholic or Lake Washington, if the Evergreen can pull these 2 wins out, it would be, they could say that they earned that trip to the Tacoma Dome. So
definitely. And Evergreen has showed itself. I think that's a team that's gotten better as the season has gone on, and obviously played their best when it counted to not only reach state, but to beat Mountain View for that league title. So the Plainsmen, if they can survive this Tuesday game, I think that they could have a shot up there against Lake Washington. The other 3A team that played Tuesday, obviously we don't know how they're going to do. Number 14 seed Kelso Boys, coming off a league championship. They host Marysville Getchell. So obviously the Highlanders, despite being league champions, have to navigate that same tough road. Moving on to the 2A, we pretty much touched on some of these games, but going back to the Columbia River girls, they obviously, as the number 8 seed, have to take that tough trip to top seeded Ellensburg, the consensus favorite to repeat as state champions. But regardless of how the Rapids do in that game, they will be nothing if not battle tested headed into the round of 12, or if they pull an upset, the quarterfinals. How important is it to go into a state tournament setting in Yakima knowing that you've seen the best, and whoever you're playing in that first game isn't going to be as tough as the team you just played?
Yeah, this game this weekend, it's going to be like a preview to state in some ways, because you got to go to Ellensburg, which is very similar to going to Yakima, and depending on how you get there, you might even have to go through Yakima. So you got to make that trip. You got to play a really good team on their home floor. It's going to, if you get, by the time you get to the Yakima Sundome, it's different surroundings, and so it's going to be different there. So, I mean, it's really an opportunity to say, we're going to get a test run at this state tournament, Yakima Sundome setting, in a little bit of a preview, and that could help, get them ready for that. If they don't win this weekend, they're playing in that round of 12 loser out on the Wednesday of next week. They've already kind of seen the best that the 2A can offer, and so that should help and let them know what they need to do to advance on once they get to Yakima.
Well, it's not just one elite program in 2A that they'll have faced. Before that, they faced another state championship contender in WF West, and so that's another experience that the Rapids can look to say, hey, we kind of know how tough the teams are going to be here.
Yeah, and WF West, they have a 6'3" post who was a difficult matchup for them, but they hung in with WF West for 3.5 quarters. It was a tie game with less than 4 minutes to go, and the Rapids were within one position going in with inside of 3 minutes to go. Shots didn't fall for them late in that district title game against WF West, and I kind of thought maybe that they kind of lost an opportunity in the fact that the score ended up being about a double-digit margin, 54-41, that people would look at that score and go, maybe, River isn't quite as good as WF West, which is the number 3 seed. And, and the Rapids played right with them for most of that game. So I think that was a test for the Rapids, and this will be another test on top of that. And if they can draw some good things from both of those tests, it'll serve them well once they get to Yakima.
All right. Well, we touch on the other 2A teams. Columbia River boys obviously playing at Battleground. Ridgefield girls playing Friday at Battleground. 2A Greater St. champion Mark Morris heading up to play number 3 North Kitsap, and what the Monarchs hope kind of kickstarts a run deep into the 2A state tournament. But the final team from the 2A GSHL that we haven't touched on, number 13 seed Mark Morris girls, they head to Auburn to face number 12 Enumclaw. And being that the Monarchs were the number 4 seed out of the Greater St. Helens League, they have to feel really good about reaching this part of the state tournament.
Yeah, it's sort of similar with the Mark Morris girls as it is with the R.A. Long boys. They were both 4th place in the league, and they had to kind of jump over a 3rd place team to earn that spot. For Mark Morris, they had to earned that spot by being a pretty good Black Hills team. I saw Black Hills play the River Girls back at the district tournament. It's a good team. And so for Mark Morris to kind of come together here late and put together some big wins. Now they're in the 12-13 situation, so that's kind of a toss-up game for them. Again, it's another opportunity. It's an opportunity to take this season one more stretch closer. With R.A. Long, they got to go up to Tacoma and play a 10 a.m. game on Saturday, which we mentioned is not always the best thing. Mm-hmm. But if they win, and if Mark Morris boys lose to North Kitsap, then you have a Mark Morris, R.A. Long Wednesday round of 12 game at the Yakima Sundome. So that would be interesting.
Round 3.
Yeah, that would be kind of a wild setup. So, it's interesting to see how these brackets kind of work together and what the matchups could come down the road.
All right. And the final team that we haven't yet touched on, going to the 1As and the Seton Catholic boys made history in their program last year when they booked their first ever trip to the Yakima Valley Sundome and the round of 12. That was a team that had a ton of sophomores. Most of that team is back. And they must have liked that experience, even though they lost in that round of 12 game. They must have loved that state tournament experience so much because the Cougars have already booked their return ticket to the Yakima Valley Sundome. They rolled through the Trico League, won the district championship, and are a number 7 seed. They go on the road to face number 2 seed Linden Christian in a regional game Saturday, and they rescheduled that. That's not in Mount Vernon.
It's in Linden.
It's in Linden.
So,
yes.
Yeah, longer trip for the Cougars.
Yeah, but still, they have booked their passage to the Yakima Valley Sundome, and I think this is a really interesting team in that they have so many of those players back from last year. But the one X factor that they've added this year is this exciting freshman, Caden Wilson, who is proving to be one of the best players in Southwest Washington at the small school classification. A guy that I think he's like 6'1" or 6'2", can shoot, can break down a defense, can get to the rim. He's also someone, knowing a little bit about his background, that he's played in a lot of AAU big tournament games in big arenas. So he shouldn't be starstruck by the state championship spotlight. I'm really excited to see what the Seton Catholic boys do in Yakima this year.
Yeah, I think you're cheating him a couple inches on the height. I think he's closer to 6'4". But he's a matchup problem for 1A schools. A lot of 1A schools, in the fact that he can play inside, he can play outside, he can shoot, he can defend. Yeah, and he really brings in. I mean, you talk about him being a freshman, and coaches like to say that by the time you reach, February and into March, you're no longer a freshman. You're kind of a sophomore because you already had that year of experience. And so, and we also talk about Seton making the first trip to Yakima last year. Well, it's been a year of first this year for that program. League championship in the Trico League, and then a district championship last weekend. They get a little bit of a taste of the state experience because they had to go up to Yakima or to Hoquiam. Hit a little road trip to earn that district title, and then again it's a junior-led program. I think they have one senior on there, and then they have the freshman in Caden Wilson. So the ceiling is pretty high on this program looking into next year. And but I don't think that the Cougars going into this thing thinking that we're looking forward to next year. I think the opportunity is right here in front of them. You never know what next year will bring. And they've got a really good opportunity to take on a really good Linden Christian team and kind of see how they match up against one of the better teams in the state. And they know they've got an opportunity to then go to the Yakima Sundome, and then a really good opportunity if things don't work out this weekend up in Linden, that they could this time win a game at the Dome, get into the quarterfinals, and then get a bigger state tournament experience and maybe even a trophy.
Absolutely. Well, that's the one thread that kind of weaves its way through all these teams that are still playing, and a perfect way to wrap this up. It's about taking advantage of the opportunity that is in front of you. For some of those teams, they have big goals, like the Camas girls have their sights on a state championship, and that would be the ultimate goal for a program like that. For others, it's making it to the double elimination round. And for others, it's making it to the Dome, whether it's the Tacoma Dome or the Sun Dome. So that's why we love this time of year so much, to see which programs and which players can take advantage of that opportunity, that championship opportunity that's in front of them. Of course, we'll be covering all of the action. You'll be in Battleground along with Meg Wachnick and Will Denner, covering all of that action out there, those 5 games, 2 Friday, 3 Saturday. I'll be hitting the road. I'll go up to Bellevue to see the state gymnastics championships and recognize the accomplishments of those athletes. But then I'll circle around and come down and see Camas boys on Friday as they try to book their spot to Tacoma on the road. Follow all of the action on 360preps.com. We can't wait to see how this weekend turns out, and we will see you next week.